Hi, welcome to the Expanding Consciousness podcast. We've recently been talking about therapy and what is therapy and what makes a therapist masterful. And today, to expand a little bit more on the experience of therapy, I've got Nikki with me, who is a former client and has come on board to share her experience of therapy over her lifetime and what's been effective to see if it's of any benefit to you, and just to be able to explore as well that therapy is so unique and there is no one way of doing it. And as a client, you are also unique, and I touched on specializing in you in a previous podcast. So we're going to look at the themes of that and how being in therapy is really also about you being able to find who you are and specialize in you. So thank you for joining me today, Nikki.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you on board and just be able to discuss this, as we've had a pretty adventurous journey together over time. So to just start, would you like to explain what your understanding and experience of therapy is?
Unfortunately, my experience was very negative. Therapy for me started around 6 to 7 years old, for reasons that I'm not going to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I've had several therapists over the years and did start and stop therapy the whole time. I've lost count past the 10th therapist, and that truly continued until I met you.
Yeah.
That was about 2-3 years ago now. So yes, my whole experience was very isolating. I was essentially in an office with another person. It was pretty much lights were on, but no one was home. It got to the point where people weren't even note-taking, and I would request notes and I wouldn't get that at all. So with the negative experience with therapy, it's also encouraged me to gain my own autonomy, because the culture of therapy back then, it was like therapist was God. You know, you didn't know that you could question, and unfortunately because of that I really suffered, and it just really soured my experience with therapy. I was going to therapy with the mindset that this person will fix me, you know, turn me into a better person, but I didn't realize that therapy is a tool, a very important tool. So all the power is within you, and like you said in your previous podcast, that you are a specialist on you. Only you can tell the therapist what's going on with you, because like we talked before, that the therapist has never experienced a day in your life. So yeah, you are the expert on you, and that is a very empowering statement that people need to know more of. A lot of a lot of therapists taught me how to differentiate what is a good therapist and what is a bad therapist. And yeah, it's definitely gained my own autonomy and really step into my own power when I felt like I had none.
Yeah, wow, that's really incredible. I think, firstly, to say that I'm sorry you had to experience that negative in that, and it can make it so tough when we have those experiences, because therapy is this space where you've got to be really vulnerable and feel safe. And if you don't have that with the therapist, and especially if there is that imbalance of power, or you don't feel like you can have your voice, and you said before that the therapist, you always thought they were the expert, or like they were like God, they knew everything, right? And I just wondered if you could talk to that in terms of how you see therapy now. I know you said you see it as a really important tool and resource, and that you've got more autonomy. So how has that come about, and or how does that play out now for you in your life?
Fortunately, therapy now is a positive experience. My therapy with you, I liked because it wasn't a revolving door like how it was with my previous therapist. It was the exact same cycle going around and around. But with you, happy to say that I'm not a client anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's what you want, because you've given me essential skills, the essential life skills, coping mechanisms that are helping me and not hurting me. So I was able to navigate the more serious trauma and the problems with you, with your guidance and your sympathy and your understanding, giving what I like to call the slaps and cuddles method. You always checked in with me to see that is this working for me. You also gave me homework, which I really like, that I'm able to create a safe space within myself to do this work outside a therapy environment. And I like how you incorporate nature. It's not in a tiny little office where the lights are on and no one's home. You were always very present with me. You asked me questions, and most importantly, you challenged me. You challenged my negative self-beliefs, and you really flipped that on its head. And I've never had a therapist that challenged me like you have. So you were able to give a very personal touch to my therapy, because therapy back then was a one-size-fits-all, and you just sit in an office, you talk to someone, you get medicated, but it's not a solution. It's not even a band-aid. So with you, it was more of a you really got down deep to the core of what these issues were coming up and how it affected my life and probably every aspect of it. And once I learned to overcome that, I feel like I could overcome anything. And I definitely feel more adaptable to any environment that I go in. Like, it's not to say that I don't experience troubles anymore. Like, I definitely feel more healed, but it's not to say that the journey is ever over. And I'm recently learning that I'm not a self-improvement project, because we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to achieve this enlightenment, at least not in this lifetime. That I forget to live my life, and because of that realization, I recently got in tune to my creativity.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing there's that therapy's for you, it's been this process of
a lot of trial and error.
And I think that's really key when looking at therapy, is that it's so personal, right? And there's this essential element to making sure that you are getting what you need and being able to voice that. And I think too, we talked about off camera about knowing what you need, or knowing who you are and what does and doesn't work for you. And that therapy really is for you, right? So you've had these really negative experiences where you kind of have all of this trust for the therapist being the expert, and then perhaps there's that lack of safety, or they're giving you activities to do that really aren't suited for you, or they're just ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not fully understanding you and what you need.
You're 100% right.
And the damage that can cause. I'm wondering, I'm really curious, what was the turning point for you having that experience to then coming to see me? Because that's a huge step of courage to try again.
Thank you for saying that. I probably wouldn't say it was a step of courage for me back then. It was just another Tuesday. It was just, you got to go to therapy. And it mainly, my main reason for going to therapy back then, it wasn't for my own motivation. It was because people were saying that you need to go to therapy.
Okay.
So when I found out that you were a therapist and you wanted to take me on as a client, and I thought, okay, give this one a shot. You were still a student then, and I thought, I didn't really have any expectations of you, to be honest. I didn't think I was going to be cured in any way. I didn't think, I was going to have any aha moments, but I had so many aha moments. I swear, she is the only therapist that has told me that I have trauma. She told me that I have a traumatic experience, and I'm like, what? And like, having that being such a new term to me, it was just so alien hearing that word, because I was just so disassociated from these problems that just felt like everyone's everyday problems, but they weren't. So yeah, what turned for me was honestly a leap of faith. It was just something telling me that, hey, what could happen? It either works out or it doesn't, and I'm so glad that I took that leap. And it definitely implemented lifelong changes, and it's all because of your personal approach, your passion for the industry, and just the way that you want to turn it on its head. And I love that. Respect that.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm really curious to know what did work for you. And you've mentioned having a real personal approach. And that's something that I really strongly endeavour to do, is to get to know my clients and really individualise and personalise the experience. And I remember saying to you at the start that my goal is that I don't want to see my clients again. Like, I'm happy to keep doing therapy, of course, but for me it's being able to empower and equip clients, and empower and equip you to have the resources, have the understanding, have the skills to lead your life and champion yourself, so that I am just a resource. I'm part of your toolkit, I think, is one of the imageries that I remember using, part of that arsenal for that battle of life that you can draw on, and you can draw on elements within the therapy, but it really becomes you. It's your process. So I'm wondering what was really effective for you, what worked really well for you.
For me, is you being the world-class bullshit detector. You could see right through me, because I had a habit of distracting my therapist, because that worked so well in the past, and they would just roll with it. So you always pulled me back and put me back on track. You encouraged me to open up, but only in my own time. But most importantly, you laid out that foundation of safety. You gave me words to practice, things that make me happy, the words that I can always retreat to. So I can let it all out in that session and not take it home with me, which is often the thing that I struggled the most in previous therapy, because it's nothing worse than going to therapy, having that session of vulnerability, and having to go to work the next day. I also like how you encourage me to do my own personal work outside of the therapy space. I always like homework. I always request notes or anything that was written about the session or about me. You're very open, honest, and transparent about that. You encourage me to speak up for myself as well. You always checked in with me, especially in really vulnerable moments. And you would know whether you need to go for the hard approach or for the soft approach, or a combination of two. It's like the slaps and cuddle approach, really. I was more needing cuddles, and most importantly, I needed connection. So I was able to have that connection with you in a professional setting. So I felt safe. I felt like I could trust you. So
Wow. They're all incredible, and thank you for being able to reflect that. And I can hear that we were a really good match.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And having that openness, and I think that's something looking back on the experiences you've had, which were quite negative, is that sometimes it's kind of the whole, there's lots of fish in the sea. And sometimes it is a bit of a fishing expedition to find the therapist that's that right fit for you. And to know, I suppose for you, so you said it was a leap of faith, right? Trying therapy again. People were telling you needed to go to therapy, and I had approached you because I was still a student in the somatics and dance movement therapy, and I needed guinea pigs to practice on. I needed eager or willing beings that were able to go on this journey of me being a student as well, and what finding my way through.
Yeah, and maybe that's how I could relate to you as well, because I was a student at the time.
Yeah.
I needed guinea pigs too.
Very true. Yeah, so there was that mutuality, and I guess that human element to it as well. I wondered if you could speak to that, the dynamics of therapist, client, and kind of having that humanizing balance in the relationship.
I do think it's important to have an image of humility. So it's important to have that personal approach, but not put you in the situation where the client believes that they cannot trust you. Like if you are being unprofessional and speaking about your own personal problems and how they relate to yours, it sounds like you're the one in the seat.
Yeah.
So you're not letting the client take charge, but you didn't do that to me. You had a level of professionalism that gave me space, but you didn't put up walls. So you fit right in between. So it was the right amount of personalization to professionalism that really inspired me to open up.
Yeah. And do you have anything that you would encourage other people in? So if we just sort of pause with, everything that's been shared, and there's a lot of different themes coming up, what are kind of the standouts to you for others, whether they're looking for therapy or they've had a negative experience before?
Yeah, unfortunately there are a lot of not good therapists out there. Understandably, as a student, like, you love learning, but learning to put it in a practical sense in how you affect real people's lives, that's when you should start questioning whether you should be in this profession, because your head and heart is in the right place. It's very important to find a therapist that has their motivations in the right place, that they actually want to help people, that this isn't just a job to them. This is an essential service. It really is. And it shouldn't be disrespected in any way. You can communicate with your therapist. You can be straight up and honest with them if you feel confident. If you feel like trust is breached, it's your choice if you want to confront them on that, or you can just straight up drop the therapist. You are free to walk away. Yeah. There are so many other good therapists out there. You can do your own research. What is very important is to research. Don't be afraid to ask your therapist questions on the first time. Ask them, what is their approach to therapy, and what outcome do you want me to have? So instead of them asking you, what do you want from this? Ask them, what do you want from me to get out of this? Don't be afraid to ask that. And most importantly, tell them what you want and what you need. So say if you need a more soft emotional approach, tell them that you need that. Tell them that I need space to talk right now. Or if you prefer the more logic side, tell them that I need solutions that are practical and efficient and that works for me. Yeah, that's pretty much the advice I have in my head.
Yeah. So having that sense of agency and that it's your process, like you're in control of that. Yeah. I'm really curious with asking for the client to ask the therapist what they're wanting to get out of it, or want to see the client get out of it. Could you elaborate on that? I'm curious with that one.
I want my therapist to work for me.
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, cool.
Because I spent a lot of money over the years going through therapists that honestly can't do their job. That sounds horrible, but it's honestly true. Even with the free sessions with Medicare, I've only been given 5, and that's supposed to last me for a span of 12 months. So I had to really ration, and I had to really be very cutthroat and decisive of who is going to work for me, what outcome am I going to get from this. And unfortunately, a lot of them have failed the test, but you haven't. So
yeah.
You might have to refresh me on the question again. What was...
When you're asking the therapist what they want to get out and getting the therapist to work for you.
That's right. I always ask them to give me notes and feedback, most importantly. And I like to test if they're accepting of me giving them feedback. Because I find a lot of therapists aren't questioned about their techniques or have any feedback from their clients. That's personally my experience. So if someone can take on feedback constructively and learn from it and learn to personalize your therapy experience. And I think most importantly, therapists need to learn to adapt to the client and as well as what other therapy techniques are out there. Not just talking one-on-one or letting the person vent. There are so many other techniques that can appeal to so many other people.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that it's a mix of the client having some awareness of what they're after and being able to have the ability and the courage, I suppose, to speak up about it and really make, like you said, make the therapist, you want them to work for you, right? You want the therapy process to really work for you. And in doing that, it's this, what I'm hearing is that the power dynamic of like the therapist is the expert, that gets balanced out. And I think that's really key because we were both students, so you were studying in a different industry to me, and me coming in as a somatics and movement therapist, and that was our kind of commonality. And I definitely know for myself, having been a student and then once I graduated, that it was like a whole different mentality for me, because I didn't have that student blanket to kind of be in. But the reality of that is I'm still a student, right? And as a therapist, as a professional, I'm still a human too. And as much as I have this training experience, and I know I talked about this in a podcast with Michael about what makes a therapist masterful, is that as much as we have training and experience, you're the expert on you, right? The client is the expert on them. And so I think that's where the power dynamic can be equalized, because I bring in my life experience, as in my lessons I've learned, I bring in the training that I've had, and then you bring the fact that you've lived with you all your life, right? I haven't lived with you all your life. I haven't been in your shoes, in your body, living that out. And so I think that's just awesome what you said about the client knowing and the client being able to choose and have their say and choose the therapist, get the therapist to work for you. I think that's really important to remember, is that we are all so unique. Therapists are also really unique. We all have different ways of approaching life, and sometimes it won't match up. And sometimes ruptures in the relationship can happen. Sometimes safety can be jeopardized or broken, and there is opportunity there to be able to speak up about it, because that's for, in that safe environment, that's for you to be able to vocalize, hey, this isn't what I ordered. This isn't what I'm after. And if you don't feel safe about it, to be able to find a way to reach that safety and to resolve that. And it is a horrible thing when safety is compromised and when you have a negative experience. And I think the encouragement is that it doesn't have to stay negative. You know, there's people that you can reach out to. You took that extra leap of faith and you went, right, I'm going to make therapy mine, and you really took charge of that. And I think that's just great, a great skill to be able to have, a great learning experience. I think it might be fair to say that, you know, you've come from these negative experiences and then found what you like and what works for you.
Yeah. Nice way to sum it up.
Yeah. And having, as we get ready to close this podcast episode for today, is bringing it back to what we've heard is that safety, having the humanization or that equanimity between one another, and being able to specialize in you, having the connection and personalization of sessions where the therapist is really working to get to know you, and they're not just sticking to their one structure or their one modality, but you find it beneficial when there's that flexibility to work in with what you need. And I think that's that constant, you know, we're constant learners, constant students, constant explorers of what is going on in the world. And I'm hearing it's important for therapists to keep having that as well. And we definitely have that in the professional setting of having our professional development as well. I'm wondering if there's any key things I've missed, or if there's any other bits of, you know, golden nuggets that you want to impart at all.
I don't know. I think what I would like to say to the audience is that healing is a never-ending journey, and that it is possible. It is most certainly possible. I've been through probably the worst of the worst, and still I had faith that when something came around, it would be right for me, and I was right. So I'm glad to have that kind of hope.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm like kind of borderline delusional in that way. But you kind of got to be. So I encourage people to not give up if it's very, very important to them. If you can see how it negatively affects you, you can see how it negatively affects others. And your motivation for therapy should be not only for others and what they say, but most importantly, it needs to come from you, because the core of it is love. It is self-love. It is finding connection, which is so important, and we crave that as human species. A lot of our problems can be solved with connection and love, most importantly.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Just letting that settle, like that's hearing it from others, you know, if people are encouraging you to go, if that little voice inside of you is telling you, hey, we just need some help, and doing it, it's an act of love. It's doing it in love for yourself, so that essentially you can be free, right? And live freely, rather than needing to live in that suffering or that wounding. And taking those steps of faith to move forward.
I agree. Life it's not meant to be suffering. It's not about constant suffering. There's just so much good out there. It's unfortunate it's not really advertised as much as the bad, because we as a species immediately go to what is bad, because it's part of our survival instincts, honestly. We know that if we understand and study the bad, we can avoid it. It's a shame we don't do that with the opposite, with love. you know, if we don't understand it, we won't be able to let it grow.
Yeah. And I must say that's something that's been a key learning for me working with you, was realizing that we can problem solve and we can work through our challenges and find healing and get from wounding to kind of, I guess, neutral and being okay. And then the next process is moving into thriving and being happy. And like you said before, you've come into that creativity and you're getting into your art again and your other hobbies. And that's a process. And being able to find the right person or people to work through that with you on a professional level, with your support network around you, so that you feel safe and you can move in that love. Yeah.
No, I also like to mention that my therapy with you, I think it lasted a span of a year, and that was really hardcore. It started off with weekly sessions, and then it gradually went to bi-weekly to just whenever, and it got to the point where I didn't need to see you again.
Yeah.
Pretty much in a professional setting. So you've definitely given me the skills to face the rest of my life a lot better. I feel a lot more happier. I feel like I could take on anything, and honestly not much really bothers me. So,
that is awesome. Yeah.
So that's definitely what you get when you when you're a therapist and working with Anna. So she's very, very good at what she does.
Thank you. Yeah. It's lots of slaps and cuddles,
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah,
It's that, you know, we developed that term because it's the slaps and cuddles. It's like the reality of, hey, you know, you're getting distracted or you're getting lost in it and coming back to focus. But then that cuddles, having the softness and the heart and the empathy, and it's love in both forms, and all to, you know, my mission is to connect you with you, connect clients with them, be connected with myself, and then each of us connect with one another as well, and connect holistically, mind, body and soul, and to repair any of those ruptures that have happened where we're disconnected, where we're wounded, and to work through them. And I really embark on the mission of doing my best to do that in unique ways for each client, and really get on each person's level, because I know everyone's different. You know, I've had in my lifetime where I felt like I really don't belong, and having to find who I am and find my worth and my belonging. And so I get it. I get what it's like to be confused and lost and alone and need something individualized and something special that encourages you to connect with yourself. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to summarize it.
Yeah. So we're going to close up there for today. Thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
Yeah, if you have any questions, further comments, if you'd like to jump on a podcast and discuss a hot topic, then please let me know. And we're going to have another episode where Nikki is keen to put me in the hot seat and pepper me with some questions about all things therapy and my sort of experience. So keep an eye out for that. And please stay connected, stay in touch, and move with gentleness and love. Thank you.
Thank you very much.